There are church moments that leave you speechless, not because of anything spiritual, but because of how far some people are willing to go in the name of faith. Some of these clips will shock you, some will confuse you, and a few of them will leave you with more questions than answers. Here are 10 unbelievable church moments caught on camera. Let's get into it. Number 10. The pastor who sprayed doom on his congregation in 2016. A South African pastor named Lethabo Rabalago became one of the most talked about figures in the country, and not for any reason you would expect. During a live church service, Rabalago picked up a can of Doom, a common household insecticide used to kill flies and mosquitoes, and began spraying it directly into the faces of his congregation members. People coughed, some winced, others held still because they genuinely believed what the pastor told them, that the spray carried healing power. He claimed the chemical had been supernaturally transformed into a miracle cure for illness. Footage of the service spread globally within days. Health authorities in South Africa were furious. Medical professionals warned that inhaling insecticide could cause serious respiratory damage. Rabalago was eventually charged and fined, but what stayed with people wasn't the legal outcome. It was the image of a grown man spraying poison into the faces of trusting worshipers and calling it God's work. Number 9. The resurrection that required a deposit. Most people have heard of miracle services, but this one had a price tag attached before the miracle could even begin. A video from an African Pentecostal church showed a pastor standing over a woman lying flat on the ground, telling the congregation that she would only be raised once enough money had been placed on her body. Members lined up, bills were dropped. The pastor counted. The woman did not move until the amount he considered sufficient had been collected. Then, right on cue, she opened her eyes, sat up, and the church erupted in celebration. Those watching online later pointed out that the woman's breathing was visible throughout the entire video. Her chest was rising and falling the whole time she was supposedly dead. She had never stopped breathing. The miracle had a minimum deposit, and it was all there on camera for anyone willing to look closely enough. Number 8. Prophet Bushiri walks on air. Before we get to the pastor who was arrested after his miracle money turned out to be counterfeits printed in his own back room, let's talk about the moment a South African prophet convinced thousands of people that he had defeated gravity itself. Shepherd Bushiri, founder of the Enlightened Christian Gathering Church in Pretoria, became one of the most viral religious figures in the world after footage emerged appearing to show him hovering above the stage during a church service. Crowds screamed. People collapsed. The clip was shared millions of times. Investigators and video analysts later examined the footage carefully. The slow-motion breakdown showed camera angles, lighting changes, and a platform that appeared far more raised at one edge than the other. Critics said the effect was produced through a combination of strategic camera positioning and an elevated stage section invisible to the congregation from the front. Bushiri denied any trickery, but the questions never went away, and neither did the footage. Number 7. The pastor who sold holy petrol. In a small church in Zimbabwe, a pastor told his congregation that God had given him the ability to consecrate petrol, turning ordinary fuel into a miracle liquid capable of healing sickness and bringing prosperity to whoever drank it. Members drank it. Footage captured the moment, cups of fuel being handed out and consumed during a service while the pastor prayed and declared victory over illness. Health officials who later reviewed the video were alarmed. Ingesting petrol causes serious damage to internal organs. Several congregation members were reported to have experienced severe illness following the service. The pastor insisted the liquid had been spiritually transformed and that any sickness experienced afterward was the result of insufficient faith. The camera captured everything. The hospital records confirmed the rest. Number 6. The fake prophet and the homemade cash. A prophet operating in East Africa built an impressive following by performing what he called a money miracle, pulling large denomination banknotes seemingly out of thin air during services and distributing them to members of the congregation as proof of God's financial blessing. What investigators discovered when they raided his property ended the ministry almost immediately. A basic printing setup, paper, ink cartridges, cutting equipment was found in a back room of his home. The banknotes he had been handing out to worshipers were not legal currency. They were homemade replicas, close enough to fool someone in the heat of a church service, but flagged immediately by any bank machine. Members who had brought these notes to shops and ATMs had already begun to face problems before the arrest. The prophet had not multiplied anything. He had manufactured it, and the cameras from his own church services became the clearest evidence against him. Number 5, the stampede that nobody predicted. Stay with us, because number 1 involves a moment so bizarre, it caused international news channels to question whether what they were watching was even real. But first, the moment a church service turned into a scene of pure chaos in under 60 seconds. In 2023, a large outdoor religious gathering in Nigeria descended into a deadly stampede after a rumor spread through the crowd during the service that a gunman was present on the grounds. The claim was false. There was no gunman, but in a crowd of thousands pressed tightly together, a false alarm is enough. People ran, others were knocked down and trampled before anyone could clarify what was happening. Multiple deaths were confirmed in the aftermath. The entire sequence was captured on cameras from multiple angles. The calm service, the sudden surge of movement, the collapse of order in seconds. Authorities later stressed that the rumor has no basis. In fact, an ordinary service had become a tragedy because of a single false word spreading faster than the truth. Number 4. The pastor who faked his own death. A Kenyan pastor announced to his congregation that God had instructed him to die and be resurrected after 3 days, just as Christ had been, as a sign of divine authority over his ministry. He instructed his followers to place him in a coffin. They did. What was captured on camera in the days that followed was not a resurrection. It was a group of increasingly concerned and confused church members gathered around a sealed coffin in their church building, waiting for a man who did not emerge. By day 3, with no sign of movement and growing concern from outside the church, authorities intervened and the pastor was found, alive, inside, having apparently underestimated what 3 days without food and water inside a sealed box actually felt like. He was hospitalized. His congregation was left to process what had just happened. Number 3. The holy fire that went wrong. During a charismatic service captured on video, a pastor attempting to demonstrate the power of holy fire produced a large open flame on stage and began moving it toward members of the congregation to show that true believers could not be burned. The demonstration did not go as planned. A woman's clothing caught fire briefly before she was helped by those around her. The pastor continued as if it were simply a test of faith that had required adjustment. No one in the footage appeared to question whether the entire concept was dangerous. Viewers watching online later described it as one of the most difficult clips to watch, not because of dramatic injury, but because of how calmly everyone continued while a woman stood with burnt fabric on her arm. Number 2. The prophecy that was Googled. We are almost at number 1, and trust me, you will want to stay for it. But first, the prophet whose personal prophecies were a little too accurate to be supernatural. A video surfaced showing a well-known prophet calling out specific personal details about members of his congregation during a service. Their names, their problems, even addresses. The crowd was amazed. Then, a journalist who attended one of the services noticed something. Before entering, every congregant had been asked to complete a detailed registration form at the door. The journalist requested to see the forms after the service. Every piece of information the prophet had declared from the stage was traceable directly to what someone had written on their entry card. Staff had been photographing the forms backstage and feeding details forward. The prophet's gift of knowledge had a clipboard and a camera behind it. Number 1. The moment the congregation was robbed. Mid-service, in broad daylight, during an active Sunday service in South Africa, armed men walked into the church, moved to the front, and ordered the pastor to continue preaching while they systematically moved through the aisles, collecting phones, wallets, and jewelry. The entire incident was captured on the church's own CCTV system. The pastor continued speaking, reportedly to keep the congregation calm. Members sat still. The robbery took several minutes. When police later reviewed the footage, what struck investigators was not just the audacity of the crime, it was the silence of the congregation. Hundreds of people, frozen in their seats, handing over their belongings one row at a time. Nobody moved, nobody ran. They simply waited. The video spread globally, and for many people watching, it raised a question that had nothing to do with crime, about how much power the setting of a church can have over a room full of people, even when what is happening has nothing to do with God at all. 10 moments, 10 cameras that were rolling at exactly the right or wrong time. Some of these were shocking, some were tragic, and a few of them were almost impossible to believe, even while watching. Drop in the comments which one hit you hardest. Like the video if you want to see more real content like this, and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next.